After seeing the school as organization model functioning at 2 schools in Atteridgeville, Themba, Tandile and Mfana had a clear understanding of how these schools have initiated change. Both schools seem to focus on the internal processes of the school. In Soshanguve, they would see an approach that was different in some interesting ways, the school as community approach. In the Soshanguve area, all schools form part of a broader plan where the whole Soshanguve community works together on a local plan to get schools working effectively. Business, parents, teachers, and students all form part of the Soshanguve Education Coordinating Committee, or SECC. This committee organizes community interventions into education in Soshanguve, like hosting training workshops for SRCs. As part of the SECC, Andrew Schofield has seen the need for this approach.
Within the school community approach, we then have to look beyond the school boundaries, because there's this constant interplay between the school and the community. Teachers are hijacked, and their cars are taken in that school during school hours. Constant undermining of the human being in our communities. Sustainable school community development attempts to understand the nestedness in which schools and people live, and then work and build the communities around the school.
We love you, and we can only, as I said, succeed if you then decide to change your attitude.
The SECC makes sure students take responsibility for their own education. At Mfana's school, this seems to happen as well. The SRC shares the responsibility for the smooth running of the school.
In black schools for the past few years, the role for SRC is to fight teachers, beat them, but today in our school we don't do that. In fact, we have never done that. So we take problems with much respect, bring them to the management, and we solve them very friendly. And we try to avoid strikes and to do all those things. We are changing to the 21st century.
Themba and the 2 teachers arrived at Badisago Primary School in Soshanguve. Like the other 120 schools in the district, this school is remodeling itself according to the school as community approach. They met the principal, Mrs. Mabena, and her deputy, Mr. Sikwaila. Themba's group was curious to know more about the SECC.
What role would local councillors and local structures play within the SECC? I mean, I'm trying to get clarity here. Is it just governing bodies forming the SECC or representative from governing body structures, or is it in fact a structure that is formed by local, in some areas they call them education development committees, which are linked to the local council? Is there any linkage in this instance?
No, all stakeholders are represented in the SECC. The business sector is represented, the community is represented, schools are represented. So SEC embraces all these stakeholders that you can talk of in a community.
Although the school as community approach emphasizes the importance of locating schools in the community, it does not reject the strategies that the school as organization approach uses. It also focuses on democracy and structure inside the school.
We actually make sure that structures deliver by involving them in whatever we're doing, and also by ensuring that there is actual maximum participation amongst all members of the structures. We've also come up with a clear code of conduct and a school constitution, which we expect each and every member who is attached to the school to adhere to.
At Badisago, the principal has become more of a leader. Instead of giving instructions all the time, she develops responsibility in her staff, encouraging them to develop their skills and constantly improve their knowledge. She is really trying to make this school a learning organization.
I suggest that
Tandile was wondering if this nurturing approach to management had anything to do with the principal's gender.
One thing that struck me was that the 2 schools that we went to, which seemed to be very progressive in terms of their change in management system, were headed by women. And I've always been interested in the stereotypic explanation of management skills. You have to be strict and really bossy in your dealing with your workers, into being more lenient, understanding, cooperative, working with them. And the argument that we have in most literature on management is that The thing about democratic management of schools is that it requires that males move away from their so-called macho male tendencies into becoming more open, which seem to be, related to female way of doing things.
What seems to make a real difference at Padisago are the committees that have been set up in both staff and parent structures and how they work together.
Examples that I would make use of are subcommittees within the school. We have subject heads, okay? And the conveners of the subject heads are not necessarily people who are within the management. They're just ordinary teachers. They see to it that policies of different subjects are formulated. And then we also have committees like those that are in the governing body. I've made mention of the fundraising committee, security and discipline.
These committees are often linked to community structures. The members of the Security Committee, for example, get involved in structures like the Community Policing Forum. The police force reciprocates and is actively involved in the school.
And I also take part in the activities of the governing body, and I also give advice as to how to go about addressing crime, issues like child abuse, issues, as you know, that we have problems with drugs in schools, how to address such issues.
The school as community approach, or as they say in Soshanguve, sustainable school community development approach to school change, sees the school firmly embedded in the community in which it is situated. Schools exist not only to educate children, but also to impact positively on the development of the community. But schools must also consider the impact of the community on the school and must realize that developing structures in a school cannot work if the community around it is fractured and anarchic. Father Mkachwa is from Soshanguve and has been instrumental in organizing all sectors of the community to work together through the SECC, addressing problems that impact on education.
Soshanguve Education Coordinating Committee, whose task it was to coordinate the activities, the actions, the decisions of all the PTSAs. That created a culture of community participation.
The group met Mos Nkonyane, the district officer for Soshanguve. What is it that has made schools in this district so organized and the community so special?
What is special about this community is that they took the initiative to involve, structures. For instance, teachers, the church, political organizations, and quite a number of structures that are in the community. We had workshops which were not initiated by, the department, the district, by us. But the people who were, at the forefront were community structures, for instance, the SECC.
Assuming here a community comes which has those structures but hasn't tapped on them adequately, and they say, we want to do it, but we don't know where to start, what would you suggest they do?
Yeah, it's a very tricky situation because, communities are not the same. But what I would suggest is that the teacher needs to play the central role. For instance, why in this community we seem to be successful is that teachers do not see the involvement of parents, for instance, as a threat, because they are also involved. I mean, as we move into the 21st century, I believe the responsibility and the role of the teacher needs to be more than, ever before. Rather than teachers regarding themselves as employees only, or perhaps as workers, they need to view themselves as maybe chief executive officers. In other words, they need to take full control of the process.
Temba questioned Moss on what seemed like a lack of planning. This seemed to differ from the careful planning they witnessed at the schools using the school as organization approach.
But Bramos, some people would also argue that you actually do need an organogram insofar as it clarifies roles, responsibilities, accountability, information flow. And what did you say to that?
I would say what should come first, it's work. For instance, there are people who believe in change management. You need to start with a strategic plan. And I would argue and say no, although I do believe for an organization to work successfully, there must be a clear vision, a mission statement, clear objectives and so on. But I would argue very strongly that that should come after we have achieved what we want to achieve.
In the Soshanguve district, it's not all an anarchy. It's not a situation which everyone is running off and doing everything else. Moss is clearly in control of the situation. But his method of control is by saying to people, we are an education district, we are educators, act on your education mandate. What you define as being pedagogically sound, educationally sound, I'll support you in that. And Moss supports the principles.
So the school as community approach says it is crucial that one must first get the basics right in the community. Only then will the other things follow. As they walked back to the school, Temba was struck by the story Moss told them on how community leaders got involved in the schools.
There is a real sense in which the people in the communities, high-profile political figures, high-profile community leaders, take a real interest and an active involvement in the school. I loved it when he said, when problems started in my schools around the issues of admissions, I didn't have to get into the school as a departmental official. I only had to talk to people within the community structures, and they moved in and solved it, and they only came back to tell us, this is what we have resolved.
So in Soshanguve, they take the context of the whole community into account and try and solve community problems through schools and school problems through community intervention. How does the school as organization model relate to this approach?
I think the community involvement is important, but I think there's a danger of losing focus. I would say you've got to focus on teaching and learning, but you've also got to have a concern for the well-being of your students. You've also got to have a concern for the authority in the school, that you can discipline a child that maybe commits a felony or whatever. So I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but I'm saying that the focus of the intervention must be teaching and learning. Otherwise, you begin to be sidetracked.
Andrew used to conduct workshops using the school as organization approach and is aware of its limitations. He warns that schools using this approach should guard against attempting to solve school problems without looking at the influence of the wider community.
We can then run OD training programs with an SRC. But myself as an outside facilitator, how do I know that that SRC might not be a front for a group of drug lords, student drug lords? And that is the kind of depth psychology of a school that OD practitioners seldom have access to, because it's the hidden curriculum of the school. It's the hidden curriculum of the community that communities seldom wish to bring up. And so often when I was with the NGO world, I would think that I'm doing the right thing by running all of these development workshops with a particular SRC. Meantime, what I now find out is that some of the biggest number of gangsters in the community were in those SRCs that we were training. And that means you need a much more deeper psychology to training your SRCs.
Although there are many differences between the two approaches, there are also many similarities. What they both emphasize is the importance of strong democratic structures and parent involvement in school governance. The governing body at Badisago is a body with clout that shows clearly that democracy is no talk shop. It's up to them to think through and evaluate issues.
And from that evaluation, then we can say, yes, this is right, we can provide, or this is not right, we don't, after checking the information given to us. And at the same time, we don't just say, yes, teachers say they need that, then from the governing body, we just rush to the shop, sign a check and buy. we first have to speak to the parents in a parent meeting, report that, and get the feelings of the parents' meeting.
If there's a teacher who's not doing his job, maybe is the principal, do you think you can fire the teacher?
First of all, we would like to help that particular person as the governing body, because the effectiveness of that particular person boils down to the education of our children.
But if this does not work, the governing body can take action.
We can write the report and send it to the assistant director, complain about the said teacher or the principal.
Nevertheless, because of good communication, proper structures, and a culture of transparency at the school, this seldom happens at Badisago.
If you have structures and people know what they are doing or ought to be doing, it makes a big difference, huge difference. And I was really impressed.
As the group traveled back, they realized that the process of school change is also a journey. It is comprised of difficult decisions, amongst other things, deciding on your approach. But it has a worthwhile destination, a people-centered school.